everybody. Very happy to introduce Diane or Heather, who's going to join us for our author chat tonight. You're going to give us an introduction to yourself and your books to start off with.
Yes, hi everybody. I'm Heather Burnside, and I've written 12 gritty crime novels, all set in and around Manchester. The latest of which I've actually remembered is Guilt, and that's excuse me, that's a spin-off from my Working Girls series, which was a series of 5 books, and this has sort of come off the back of that because I thought of an idea of something else that I could do based on the series. So that's the latest one, Guilt.
That's what I was going to ask actually, because I've read one of yours before,
Yeah.
And I really liked it, so I was quite happy that we booked you back.
Oh, that's nice.
To start reading again, but I feel like I do feel like I've maybe missed something. Would it be better if you read the Working Girls series before you read Guilt, or does it matter?
I think it does work as a standalone. The actual book that it follows on from is Crystal. So yeah, I think when I wrote it, I remember saying to my editor, the sort of twist, people that have read Crystal will still get something from it, but the people that haven't read anything before will get, will get something from it as well. Or should I say the big twist, because there's a few little twists along the way.
Yeah, no, I'm still enjoying it.
Yeah, it's very much can be read as a standalone.
Yeah, you feel like I'm sort of reading it thinking, I know I've missed, like it's referring back to things, and I almost wish I'd have read that first, but that's just me.
Yeah.
You can read it without, you're right.
Yeah, that does all sort of come together as the novel progresses anyway. I like to sort of, even if it wasn't a spin-off, I like to sort of throw things in there that keep you guessing, keep you on your toes.
I like where it's set as well. It's set in I used to live in Altrincham.
Ah, right, yeah, that's a nicer part of Manchester, isn't it? That's why I picked it.
Is it? I don't know. I don't really know Manchester that well. We lived there for 3 years.
Yeah.
And then we moved again, but I'm reading
Yeah,
it.
there's some nice property, and I've not really been up that way for a long time, but I used to work in Sale many years ago. And yeah, there's some nice property up in Altrincham. So as Laura's sort of come on in life, if you like, since a few years ago, I thought I'd place her in Altrincham now, rather than, the sort of tougher, rougher areas.
Oh, so Laura Hamilton saying Crystal's on offer in the works, 3 for £6 deal.
Right, great. Oh, that's nice to hear.
That'll be me off to the works then, Laura. Well, I've got Guilt on Kindle, but I prefer books in paperback. I don't know about you.
Oh dear. Oh, that eternal Kindle or paperback debate.
Resounding in the paperback category, if I'm honest. Sam is entirely Kindle. She would prefer to read electronically. I prefer the exact opposite.
I do all 3 actually. I do audio as well now.
No, I can't audio.
Yeah, I'm such a slow reader, so it kind of helps me to get through more books and to try different books, because I do the audio through a reading group.
Oh, that's a good way of doing it. So you all read the same one and then talk about the audio?
Yeah.
Do you discuss the narrator as well?
Sometimes, mainly the book, really, and sometimes the author, and whether they've done other books if we like the book. And it's interesting to get different takes on a book, but also it makes me read more, because I just felt that as a writer I should be reading more, so it kind of helps with that.
So back to go.
Yeah.
Where do you get your inspiration from for your books?
Okay, so they come from different places. Guilt is the initial inspiration for that came from the series. So to explain that, I'd have to go right back to the beginning of the
Don't
Working
give away too
Girls.
many spoilers.
No, it won't. So what happened with the Working Girls? It started with the first book, The Mark, and that was based. Well, the idea stemmed from back in the 90s. Police series I watched on TV, and you might remember, you might not. I don't know whether you're old enough. Prime Suspect, the original series. And it was a scene, and it's only a sort of vague recollection. And what I used to do when I did my writing course, I'd jot down any ideas, anything that sort of sprang to mind. Even if it wasn't a full book, even if it was just the seed of an idea, I'd jot it down and think, I'll use that one day. So, it took me about 20 odd years to use that one, but I came to it eventually. So yeah, The Market, it was this scene where D.I. Tennyson is sitting in this really sort of rough, dodgy pub, surrounded by working girls, sex workers, and she's got this affinity with the girls. She's trying to get information out of them about a crime that's been committed. That's as much as I can remember. But what sparked the idea for me was that the fact that in that setting she looked so out of place, because she was very refined in a smart suit and very well spoken, and she just stood out. And I just thought to myself, wow, she's leaving herself open to all sorts of risks. From my memory, she was on her own, but I might have got that wrong because it was a long time ago. So in my book, I've made her a journalist who is followed home by this pimp who the girls work for. And he kind of takes a shine to her because she's so different, and that then turns into obsession. So that was the first book. And when I come to do the research for that book, I was quite adamant that I was only doing that one book and various standalones, because I'd already written 2 trilogies. And I'd actually told my editor, I'm sorry, but I don't want to do any more series. I want to do standalones. And I started doing the research, and I started reading autobiographies of former sex workers, watching videos, and just finding out as much as I could about that world. And it was a series of videos that I watched by the BBC about working girls in Leeds that worked the Leeds red light area. And they had a lot of sort of similarities in the backgrounds that they came from. Tough upbringings, time in care, parents who'd been on drugs, drug addicts themselves, alcoholics, etc., etc. And the more I watched these girls, the more I thought, I've got to write about them, because despite the similarities in them, they all had a distinct personality as well. And I just thought, I just felt compelled to write about these girls. And as time went on, I just thought of more and more ideas for them. So initially it was 3 books, and then I went to visit. I thought of an idea for book 4 and book 5, but not enough to flesh it out. So I went to visit a couple of charities in Manchester, and it was speaking to them really that, I found out a lot of these scenarios that the girls have to deal with, etc., etc. And so I think very often, just to sort of sum it up, your research can fire up ideas, because that started as 1 book, became a series of 5, and now there's a spin-off as well. The spin-off was very much as I wrote the series, and I liked the character Crystal, whose real name is Laura. And during Crystal, she had a 10-year-old daughter. And because of the year when it was set, as I wrote the series, I thought, well, actually, by the time I'd written all 5, I thought, a daughter will be about 20. Could I kind of do something with that? And the initial idea was to make her a police officer. And then I thought, she's probably a bit too young for the senior role that I'd want to fit her into. So then just sometimes I'll just wake up and I'll think, yeah, that's it. I'll have had quite a vivid dream, and I think, yeah, that's where I'm going with it. That's where I want to place her. And that's how Laura, the mother, how her past comes into things through her daughter. So, yeah, so quite often research, and just when I'm not even looking, Sometimes I do have vivid dreams and I'll wake up with an idea for a novel, which is brilliant. I love it when that happens. Only happens about once a year, but it's wonderful when it does. I'm just on a high all day then. But yeah, I do watch a lot of trash TV, but I call it research because the type of books that I write, the gritty crime, yeah, I call it research. So that's my justification for watching trash TV.
So I need to start coming up with a reason for watching trash TV.
Yeah.
Love it.
Yeah, it's.
I think the research really tells though, because I think you sort of. I mean, I've only read in your Working Girl series. I've only read Guilt so far, but
Yeah.
it feels really like you're not like judging Laura or anyone in it. You're sort of just presenting what life was like for her, what choices are there. It sort of tells us research.
I think when I went to see the charities in Manchester, it really touched me because it made me realise that the vast majority of people do not choose to work the streets as a career. It's a variety of circumstances that they're born into that they can't help. And in fact, in the last two books in the series, Amber and Sapphire, I've put author notes in the front of the books because they go very much into homelessness as well. Because there's quite a strong link, the charities told me, between homeless young women and sex work, because quite often they'll sell themselves for a variety of reasons, whether it be a bed for the night, something to eat, drugs, etc. So yeah, in those two books, I've kind of put a note explaining, putting details of the charities to help people, or if people are as touched as I was when I went to the charities by reading their stories, if they want to donate to the charities or help in any way they can. Because yeah, it's been quite an eye-opener really, finding out about that world.
Yeah, I can imagine. You all of your books have got a really strong sense of place as well, haven't they? Because they're all set in Manchester, and that really, they feel like they need to be set there, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I've lived here a long, long time.
It's like the places where they are kind of really relevant to like what they're doing. It's, I don't know how to explain it. It's the sense of geography is really important, I think.
Yeah.
Stories.
Yeah, like I say, I've lived here a long time and I've seen a lot. I mean, when I first started with my first book, that was actually, it was accidental that I ended up writing in this genre, but it was really because I was writing this book that had a bit of a chick lit feel, but it really wasn't going anywhere. So I just asked the question, what if? And then it became a crime novel. And once it became a crime novel, I'd found my genre then, because I drew on, because I kind of spent my teens on this really rough council estate, I drew on a lot of things that had happened close to home. The estate where I used to live, after I'd left there, the gangs actually moved in. So it was constantly in the news. So I've drawn on all these things, and I try to bring sort of major events in Manchester into the books as well. So like one of the books features the bomb. So a couple of my characters get caught up in that when the bomb goes off in, I think it's the 96 one, not the one at the arena, the older one in the 90s. So, and obviously the gang wars and things like that, I've based them on real life events, although my characters, I have to stress, are fictional. So I'm not writing about any particular person.
But you have used sort of things that you know about, because I mean, the question that follows this is normally, are you tempted to write sort of in any, like outside of Manchester? But I kind of feel like they need to be in Manchester, your books.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know whether I would. I do have quite a desire to write psychological thrillers. Whether they would be set in Manchester or elsewhere, I don't know. And I suppose a lot of it would depend on advice, because a lot of the reason I want to do, well, there's two reasons. One's to test myself and prove to myself that I can do it. The other reason is because with the gritty crime genre, you're quite limited to the UK market. They don't sell very well abroad. So I have kind of been told in the past, you know, fictitious cities work better because it'll sell anywhere. So that, you know, that would probably influence that decision if I was to write outside of Manchester. But in my head, it would probably still be Manchester, but just with a fictitious name that could be. Because I suppose that there are characteristics of cities, aren't there? A lot of, you know, cities do have things in common. So, yeah, I'd have to kind of focus on that, I think.
I think it's interesting that you describe yours as like part of the gritty crime genre, because they are marketed like that. They've got those kind of covers. And in all honesty, that's not a genre I read. But I really like your books. They're great.
Oh, that's
And I
lovely.
think
Thank you.
that they just explore like the human condition more than being like particularly gritty. Like
Yeah.
gritty things happen,
I
don't they?
think,
They're about like relationships and people and
yeah, I think some are grittier than others, to be honest. Amber and Sapphire, I think, from memory, are particularly bad, particularly brutal. So I suppose it might have depended on my frame of mind at the time, what sort of a few months I was having. So yeah, I think I prefer the label gritty or urban, gritty crime or urban crime to gangland, because I do find there's a little bit of snobbery in the sort of writing world when it comes to gangland. I do see comments where reviewers will say, you know, same old, and they're not same old, because there's some absolutely fantastic authors writing this genre now, and they all put a different take on it. Yeah, there are some that are a little bit, you know, follow the same lines, but it's a growing genre, so it's, you know, we're kind of branching out of the core gangland thing.
well, I guess as well, like all sort of subgenres of crime have that problem, don't they? You know, people will look at it, and if it's not for them, they will make a judgment about it.
Yeah, and I think it's a matter of trying different authors rather than just trying one author and saying that's not for me, because I've read a few authors in the gangland genre, and some of them are really good authors, and each book's written in, there are a few where the style's similar, but there's a few that I've read where it's a completely different writing style, and like I say, they're fantastic authors.
Yeah, I had quite a gangland year last year for author chats. I got quite a lot of the authors who wrote them.
Yes, we all know.
It's because of how it worked. Like it's not we don't look at like who writes what genre really when we schedule them in. It just worked that way. And I read quite a lot more than I would normally have read. And there is a massive scope of different kind of stories within it.
Yeah, I think so.
And some really good ones.
Yeah, a lot are family based, aren't they? But mine, I'm trying to think. Some are, but some aren't. So I don't think, you know, I'm going to do this to warring families when I write a book. I just think of an idea, and it just happens to be that I write gritty, and I think that's probably because of my background as much as anything.
So why the draw into psychological crime?
Why?
Yeah. What's making you tempted to go into that?
It's a genre that I enjoy reading. So, and again, it's still crime. I think I'd still be on the gritty side of psychological crime. I like a good thriller. So, yeah, and I think it's not really that far different from what I'm writing now, because my books are thrillers, but I think a lot of the difference is in the setting and the characters. I kind of love that buzz of putting shocks in the books or putting twists in and thinking, yes, this is a good one. So, and I think I'd get that same vibe with a psychological thriller as I get in The Gangland.
Yeah, well, I feel like Guilt is almost a little bit of the way there, if you know, the half I've read reads very almost like a sort of quite a domestic, like psychological sort of story.
Yeah.
It might change. I'm only halfway through.
Yeah, I mean, the next one, the next book that I've got going out was originally an idea for a psychological thriller. And I actually thought I was going down that path because I got an agent about 2 or 3 years ago, and she said, "Yeah, when your contract comes up, we'll go down that route." So when it comes to getting a new contract, I didn't have many ideas for Gangland, so I had to have a look at the ideas that I had, and this one that's going out in February is actually adapted. So I've brought this sort of gangster character into it. So it's kind of like almost a cross between the two. And my worry when I sent it to my editor was, is she going to say it's not Gangland enough? But actually, she's happy with it, so that's good.
Maybe that's like part of the path in. You go like halfway, and then the next one will be more.
I feel like I am doing that. Having said that, once I kind of decided that I'm staying on this path for now, and I think every time a contract comes up, I have to make that decision again and again, because you kind of think, well, I've reached a certain point. Is it the right time to make the change? But when I knew that I was going to stay on the Gangland, at least for this contract, I started doing some non-fiction reading. So I've got about half a dozen ideas now for Gangland. So it might well end up that I stay in the Gangland genre. We'll see. We'll see how it goes.
Have you ever had any TV interest in your books, like for adapting?
I had my agent was approached about, I'm going back to before pre-lockdown, so it was probably in 2019. Excuse me a minute, just have a drink. And it was a firm that was, I don't know if it was TV or film. This company do both, but they tend to do the streaming channels like Netflix and things like that. And they'd made an inquiry about Born Bad, which was the first one you read, but nothing came of it. So, yeah, you never know. They might come back years later, you never know.
Well, I think that happens with a lot of TV things, doesn't it? Like there's inquiries, or it goes to the stage where it's optioned, and then it...
Yeah, I've heard of that. People have got a lot further forward than just an inquiry, but you can't help but get excited when you get an inquiry. You think, oh, is this it? But no, it didn't happen. Not this time, anyway.
There seems to be quite an appetite at the moment for sort of more northern, like crime and things like that. So it might be.
Yeah, well, this company that made the inquiry, they were a former sort of a director or producer, somebody high up with the BBC, and another guy from an American TV company in a similar position, and they'd set up a company between them, and they were looking at sort of gritty type, I don't know if they were films, programs, shall we say. Yeah, so you never know, they might come back.
So you've been involved, have you been on a panel at Crime Central, or have you just been as a visitor?
I've been as a visitor, but I'm actually on the panel next week. So, and it's only the second live panel I've done. So yeah, that'll be fun.
Who are you alongside? Give it a bit of a push. Where is it at? What time?
I'm trying to think of the names. Oh, I've got a terrible memory. So it's at Central Library, and it's Rob Parker, who is the host, who's absolutely brilliant. And oh God, do you know, I was just looking today because Rob put another notification up on Twitter, and the names of the two authors have just escaped my mind. I'm kicking myself. I've got such a bad memory. I know it's unusual for an author, but yeah, I've got a dreadful memory unless I write it down. It's a good job it's written and not recited, because I just get nowhere.
When you find out, put a post in the group with my permission.
Oh, right, brilliant.
The authors and stuff on.
Oh, brilliant. I will do. Thanks very much.
I keep meaning to go, but it's like always after work. It's like I'd never get to Manchester and back.
Yeah, if you're not in Manchester, 6 o'clock is quite an early start, isn't it? But it's a great event because we have a bit of a social after, so it's nice, readers and authors all chatting together. So yeah, Rob makes it really fun. He's great at that sort of thing. So yeah, it's a good fun event. So I tried to go as a guest just to support Manchester really, and support Rob, who's so supportive to other authors as well.
I think it's really good that Manchester's got like such a good event as well that happens so often.
Yeah.
So it's a good thing. What was your other live panel that you did?
Perfect Crime in Liverpool. As far as I know, I've not looked recently, but I don't think they're doing it this year. They did say it was a lot of work, so it's unfortunate because it was a good event.
It looked like a good event.
Yeah, it was.
They are a lot of work.
Oh yeah, because you've got your first one next year, haven't you?
We have, yeah, and it's incredible. Like there's work in it that you don't even think about.
Yeah, I'd imagine so.
But it's exciting.
Yeah, I'll try to make it to that if I can.
But you're not far away.
No, it's not a million miles, is it? So I could probably do the training back in one day and not have to stay overnight for that one.
No. Oh, well, I mean, if you're going to say Leeds is a nice city.
It is, yeah. Yeah, my ex-husband used to work there. So he used to take the kids in school holidays and stay in a hotel and keep them entertained.
That's a challenge. And like, yeah. We did the opposite way. When we moved to Manchester, we had to stay in a hotel for a while before we could move in.
Oh, right.
To our house, and that was quite entertaining.
Yeah.
So what have you read this year that you really enjoyed? Going away from your books.
Right. Oh, again, I have just had such a terrible memory. And I've read loads of books. I've recently read Caroline England's latest novel, The Sinner. That was very good. And it's strange. I've read a couple of Mancunian authors. I don't know if it's because I've been going to Crime Central. I also read my first Chris Sims novel a couple of months ago. Can't remember which one. It's like I say, my memory's dreadful, but I really enjoyed that as well. So I've kind of decided I'm going to read more Manchester authors. What else have I read? Going back further than that, I've read a few psychological thrillers by C.L. Taylor, K.L. Slater, and the other one is T.M. Logan. So I've read a couple of books by them. And sagas, I like my sagas. So I've read a couple of Kitty Neals, and there's another big name that just escapes me at the moment. Rosie Goodwin. Yes, Rosie Goodwin. I read my first Rosie Goodwin novel a few months back. So yeah, I think that's just some of them.
That's quite a range. And yeah, I mean, if you go in Mancunian authors, you're going to be in great, like, you've got loads of choice.
Yeah, there's a lot. I'm sort of starting with the crime authors. So I'm taking it from there.
Good plan. So you were saying your memory is terrible. You have to have it written down. How do you keep track of everything over a series of books then?
I have lists for everything. It was something.
Plotted.
Sorry?
Do you meticulously plot?
Yes and no. So what I do is, it's one of the techniques they taught me on the writing course that I did over 20 years ago. And I call it either a schedule of events or a sequence of events. So every chapter or scene that I write in my novel, I write a line or two of each scene and what it's about, and just keep track as I go along. And it helps in so many ways. So, for example, if you've been away for a week and you come back to the novel, you can just quickly recap by reading through your schedule and then just reading through the last chapter. It's brilliant with things like structural edits, because structural edits, you sometimes have to go through parts of the book and you know, quite lengthy parts of the book. If your editor says you need to look at such and such a character, I just get the schedule of events up, do a search for that character's name, and have a look which scenes they appear in, and just sort of stick to those things. So yeah, it helps in so many ways. So I have that. That helps with my memory. I have a list of characters and all their characteristics. Have a list of places, and what's the other one? I have the actual document itself. And my schedule, I have a timeline as well. So when I did the Working Girls, I also had a separate document with a timeline for the whole series, because some of the girls appeared in more than one book. So with Sapphire, which was the last book, that was particularly tricky because I had to draw up this timeline where I looked at the thing as a whole and said, right, where was she in such a year? What was she doing? And I had to work through the whole thing so that I didn't contradict anything that I'd said in the other books. So yeah, it definitely helps to have all that paperwork, especially with a memory like mine.
So some of the authors we've interviewed, I think Mike Craven especially says this. He says that when you've written a book and then you're going to do all the like interviews and press about it, sometimes it's like quite a length of time since you've written it.
Yeah.
So is it quite hard to remember like all the events in the story? You know, when someone's asking you a question about what a character's done in a particular scene, you're a bit like, I don't remember.
Yeah, it was hilarious. In July of this year, I met one of, there's a blogger that I've got quite friendly with on Facebook. So I went to the Head of Zoos party in London, and I sort of had a spare half an hour. So we met up, and he'd just read Guilt. So he was chatting away about it. And I said, who's that? And he mentioned this character. He said, you know, the one that did such and such. And he said, Diane, you did write the book, didn't you? And I said, yeah, but I'm 2 books on from that now. So I think it's bad enough anyway, but when you've got a memory like mine. So what I've had to do a complete recap before the book went out. So I've had to read through the synopsis again and, you know, draw up a brief sort of blurb of the book so that when people ask me what it's about, I can tell them. So yeah, it is a bit tricky because your mind just gets so engrossed in the book. And at the moment, I've kind of got 3 books going through my mind because I've got Guilt that went out in August. I've got Blackmail that goes out in February that I'm doing the structural edits for at the moment. So I've been really bogged down with that. And then I've had to put the next book to one side while I did the structural edits. So I've got another one that I can't wait to get back to. So there's kind of like 3 books going on in my head at the moment.
And do you find it hard, like, is it hard talking about one book when you're kind of writing the other one?
In what respect? In terms of remembering?
If you're kind of living in terms of the characters that you're currently writing about, do you get a bit mixed up? Are you thinking like you're talking about Guilt, but you're thinking about...
Yeah, you can do, yeah. I mean, even tonight I thought, something flashed through my mind and I thought, no, that's Blackmail. That's the one I've been working on today. I've got to get my head in the Guilt zone now. So yeah, I had a little, before our chat tonight, I had a quick look at the synopsis again just to make sure I was in the right book.
It's yeah, and you've got quite a few books out, haven't you? So tell us, so if anyone's watching who's not sort of started, so Laura's got Crystal, tell us like what each of your series is and which is the first book to start with.
Okay, so the very first book that I wrote was called Slur. If you look on Amazon, it's got a later date because my publishers republished that trilogy. So the first trilogy was The River Hill, which is Slur, A Gangster's Grip, and Danger by Association. And that's based very much on the inner city gangs in Manchester, some of which was going on in the area where I used to live. The second trilogy is called the Manchester Trilogy, and that's Born Bad, Blood Ties, and Vendetta. And again, that's based on gangs in Manchester, but that was a different set, a different group of gangs because there was a lot going on in Manchester in the 90s. So this group were the ones that used to control the doors in the nightclubs. I presume a lot of people have heard of Hacienda and all the problems associated. So yeah, that kind of covers that area. And then the working girls is, as the title suggests, about working girls. And that's the Mark, Ruby, Crystal, Amber, and Sapphire. And then my latest novel, which is a spin-off from the working girls, is Guilt. So that wasn't bad going for somebody with my memory, was it?
That was really good. And I read Born Bad. And I loved that one. It was great because this is the thing that I was trying to say with Guilt as well. I don't think they're just like a gritty story. They do feature real life things. They do feature sort of genuine grittiness, but there is sort of just discussion of like human nature and, you know, like, are you born that way, or is it like how you're brought up? Are you like...
Yeah, I think I do draw a lot on personal circumstances, and there's also a lot of that sort of class divide thing going on in the books, because I've kind of lived both sides of the fence. So in one of the books, now let me think which one it is. I think it's Amber. In a lot of those working girls books, I do go back into the childhood, because with the research that I did for the working girls, I was quite fascinated with where people had started off and what had led to them ending up in that life. But with one of them, it's the mother is very much middle class, but she loses a husband. He dies very young of a heart attack, and she basically has to sell up a house and go to live on this really tough estate, and she's like a fish out of water. And what I find quite fascinating as well is my mother used to have a saying, and she used to say, there's no worse snob than a working class snob, because you get this snobbery not just from the middle and upper classes, but you get it from the working classes as well. So this woman, because she speaks differently than everybody in the area where she lives, she's judged, and she doesn't fit in, and she's not accepted in the area. So, and I've forgotten the question now. I hope I answered it. Just remind me if there's anything I've missed.
No, but that's a really interesting... It's a really interesting point, isn't it? And it is quite true. And I don't think it's necessarily being a snob about what class you're from. I think it's just, if you, like, I've always lived in different places. I never have the accent that's from where I'm from. And it does make it harder to fit in.
Yeah.
When you like that. You know, you can imagine that might be a sort of a big changing point for someone moving to somewhere tougher and they don't sound the same, and it's...
Yeah. I think, people do have preconceptions. And I think because a lot of my books are kind of set in different eras, I think nowadays we are more cosmopolitan, aren't we? Whereas the sort of eras where my books were set, people were... I mean, I can remember when I was a kid in the 70s, you didn't really see a lot of people from other places. And if you did, I can remember as kids saying, oh, there's a man lives up there, you know, he's from such a... And it was quite a fascination, you know. So, yeah, and I can remember the sort of... Well, they come into my books quite a lot as well, the shop gossips, you know, gossiping about people, anybody who stood out or was different or whatever. In some ways, it's a better world now because people are more accepting. But, I have a bit of a fascination with psychology and sociology, you know, put a bunch of... This is another excuse for the trash TV. Put a bunch of diverse characters together and see how they interact. So it's a bit of a fascination of mine, that. And if I was a bit younger, I probably would have liked to have studied something like that. But I think for the amount of things I want to do, I'm running out of years now.
But I think that shows. I think that sort of fascination shows in your books, and I think that's what makes them such a good read, because they are like, you know, like about the circumstances as much as, you know, and like what that does to the people. And I think it just adds that extra level of like interest to the story.
Yeah. Oh,
Like,
thank
you
you.
really buy into the characters, because there's sort of that debate about, you know, is it where you've lived? Is it like the circumstances that you're in? Is it the circumstances you're born into? And there's a little bit of that in all of the books of yours that I've read so far that I think is just really intriguing, because it
Yeah,
makes you think as you're reading it.
yeah, there's that whole nature or nurture thing going on, isn't there? And
Yeah, and
sometimes,
like
yeah,
you said, it's sort of like where you are, you know, is where you are, and like what's happening to you. Because definitely in guilt, there's sort of moments, isn't there, where it's like who you're from, you know, like who your parent is can make a big difference. Where you live now could make a difference. I'm
yeah,
trying not to give anything away, but there
yeah,
is definitely like moments, isn't there, where it's like it all hinges on a knife edge based on like
yeah,
things from the past,
yeah, definitely.
which is quite interesting. Like, it's a really good, well, worth going to read. I was trying to
Yeah,
think of how to word it without giving away a spoiler.
yeah, I think that's particularly evident in guilt because, and again, I'm trying not to give too much away, but her life now is so far different from how it was. And I think it was my editor that said that that was quite interesting that she'd worked so hard to get to where she is today, and then she was dragged back into that life. And I don't know if you've come across the scene yet, but there's a particular scene where she goes back into that world and she doesn't fit. So, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And it was when you were talking about Prime Suspect earlier, I was thinking of that scene. There's almost like a scene where she goes into somewhere and it is very like she doesn't fit,
Yeah.
but she does empathize
Yeah.
with the people around her, but she's not part of that world anymore, but she's almost being made to be part of it again.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think we were to discuss that without going into spoilers like that. It's so tricky, isn't it? It's like
Yeah,
really
it
hard
is.
to, I think as well, because your books are so set on, there's like quite a small cast of main characters, isn't there, that are
Yeah.
really involved. So it's quite hard to sort of go into the story without giving too much away.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sam said hello, by the way. She can't make it.
Hi,
So
Sam.
she can't
I
make it
know it's a shame that, but I'm sure I'll see her
to
again because we had such a good time last time. I don't know if she's told you what we got up to, but yeah.
I would believe anything. She's
Yeah.
like a pocket rocket, isn't she? She's not watching, so we can say
Well,
what we want about her.
so yeah, yeah, it'd be nice to see Sam again.
Mischief is what I imagine she got.
I think we all did. We had a very good night.
Few sore heads the next day.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. I
Yeah.
still managed to do a good day's work though the next day. I was quite impressed with myself because I think it was about 1:30 when I got to bed. So, advantages of working from home.
There really is. I can't remember the last time I came in at like 1:30.
To be honest, I don't make a habit of it in the week. I do take my writing seriously.
So Laura, who's been watching, would ask you one of her favorite questions: have you ever acted out a scene as you've written it?
Sorry, you got cut up a bit there. I didn't catch it.
Laura likes to ask if you've ever acted out a scene as you've written it.
Yeah, I do actually. I do. In the office where I work, I have a mirror at the back of me, and I've got blinds at all the windows now because it is a right of access at the back, and my neighbours would think I was a lunatic. But yeah, I do facial expressions in the mirror, and yeah, I'm trying to think. I'm sure I kind of yeah. Even if I'm doing a brutal scene, I want to get the direction of the hands, so I'll kind of be stabbing or whatever. Yeah, so it's a good job there's blinds at the windows, really.
When you're looking at your locations for your books, I'm trying to think. Laura's house in particular seems very like like it's a real place? Do you go sort of shopping on Zoopla for like your characters' houses, or?
I did intend to go into Altrincham to have a refresh, and I think that book was written during lockdown when it was very difficult to travel. So I ended up not going, but I kind of got a map up on Google. And I also, my brother had been a few months previously. So I had a little recap with him and said, oh, is it still got blah, 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 you know. So yeah, but it is nice to go and look at places just to make sure.
Well, it's probably been like late 80s, early 90s that I lived in Altrincham. So it's a while since I've been.
Yeah,
So
I believe.
I'm not going to spot anything that you might have got wrong.
Yeah, I believe that shopping precinct is still there. But to be honest, I still intend to go one day because it sounded great when my brother told me. He said, yeah, the shopping precinct's still there, but there's some lovely areas as well, apart from that. So, yeah, I would like to go.
Yeah, I mean, it's like you said, it is like I guess it's kind of one of the nicer suburbs of Manchester. I don't really know. Like I said, I don't know Manchester that well.
Yeah.
But the little bit I know is it's quite a nice little area.
Yeah, we had, I remember we had a doctor at the time who lived on a place called the Avenue, and we used to go past it, and it was stunning. These wonderful, huge, detached houses. So yeah, that kind of stuck in my mind when I was looking for a nice area.
Yeah. So would you go? I mean, I don't know how far Manchester as a whole like spreads out to. Would you sort of venture into like Cheshire sort of way, go into like any of those
Well,
surrounding areas, or because there's
Altringham's
some nice
classed.
bits, isn't there?
Yeah, Altringham's classed as Cheshire, isn't it? It comes under Cheshire. So yeah, Altrincham, and I think she in that book there's a shop in Winslow as well, which is Cheshire. So yeah, but they are the more sort of affluent areas. So I tend to stay mainly in the areas around the city centre, just because they're the more deprived areas that kind of relate to the sort of things that I write.
Well, I guess especially if you're doing working girls, the red light areas. When you were saying you'd read about them or watched a show about the ones in Leeds, that tends to be like city centre.
Yeah, in Manchester, I believe now they're it's moved a little bit. It used to be A Town Street, and then it moved to behind Piccadilly Station. But I don't know whether that still is because they've redeveloped that whole area behind there. But there's also, I think, an area in Cheetham Hill. Historically, it used to be Whalley Range, but I don't think it's there anymore. But it tends to be city centre or areas that are only sort of a couple of miles outside of the city centre. A mile or
Yeah,
two,
they're easy to
actually.
drive to, maybe.
Yeah.
Because it's not going to be anywhere too far out. I wouldn't have thought. Because as you go out of the city centre, you tend to get into the more affluent, sort of nicer areas, don't you?
Yeah. Yeah.
Generally, in most cities, I don't know a lot of them, but just in my experience, the nicer bits tend to be further out
Yeah, you do tend to find that.
as you go. I live really near the city centre, so that probably tells you what my area is like.
I'm about 7 miles out, but it's not the best area in the world.
I think all cities have those problems, don't they? You know, no area is like perfect.
Yeah. What you do find though is, I don't know if it's happened with other areas, but in Manchester there's been a lot of redevelopment. So the areas that were seen as bad areas in the past, they redevelop them and then they become quite sought after, particularly to people who don't know the city that much. So you might have people who graduated and, you know, the housing will be more affordable for them to buy in those areas.
And then they won't have any prejudice about it either. So if
Yeah.
you've grown up somewhere, you might have a prejudice about an area from the past.
Yeah.
And then even if it's been redeveloped, you'll still think it's not a
Yeah.
particularly nice place.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true.
I think, just from it. But then that's all those things that you explore, isn't it, in your book? Like, they're all those things that come across, and I think that's, again, what you're saying about your interest in sociology and things. That's where that all comes out.
Yeah. Yeah, I do have a bit of a fascination.
So, and you said what was this writing course? So you're telling us about a writing course you did 20 years ago. If you had
Yeah.
any advice to anyone starting writing, what would you advise? Would you recommend a writing course, or?
Definitely. It just helped me so much. So many tips and techniques that I probably do without even realizing I'm doing them. And I do wonder how you would go about writing a book without having done something like that. I know a lot of people say it can't be taught, or you know, just read good books, but the techniques they taught me on that course were just fantastic. It took me 3 years to do, but it wasn't just novels. It was a bit of everything. It was short stories, articles for magazines, women's magazines, trade magazines, all sorts of things. And in fact, I did do a bit of copywriting before I got the novels published. But yeah, that was a fantastic course.
What was it called? What was the
It
course?
was with the Writers' Bureau in Manchester. And at the time, I think they just did the one, which was, like I say, quite a comprehensive writing course. Whereas now they've broken it down so you can do different, you know, if you fancied focusing just on novels, you can just write novels and various different types of writing. So, which is good because, you know, 3 years is a long time. So, and I did find that I enjoyed the article writing. I was rubbish at short stories. The novel writing was my real forte. And then they covered other things like theatre and radio, which really wasn't my thing because I don't like, you know, all these sort of, I've forgotten the name for it, all the asides and what have you. To me, it spoils the continuity. So, you know, I prefer a novel.
You got to find the thing that works for you. So you don't really, you wouldn't be tempted to write any short stories around like your series, is then?
No, it's I have tried short stories in the past. I actually published a short story book. I think there were 10 stories in it, and it was ranked on Amazon something like 3.8, where my novels rank average about 4.5, 4.6. So yeah, that shows what my short story writing's like, really. I thought it was good, but obviously the public didn't, so that was that, and that kind of put me off.
Oh.
I don't know whether it's because, like my publishers say, I'm strong on characterization. So whether it's because with a short story, I don't get the time to, you know, you don't have enough words to kind of really get into the characters, if you know what I mean. And I found it hard just to keep it brief.
I think that makes sense. Yeah, your books are really really strong on the characters, but I guess what your publisher is saying is right. You maybe need longer to explore those characters and their motivations.
Yeah. So yeah, short stories just didn't work for me. And I suppose I've just got one of those minds where I'm analysing things and thinking, well, why did he do that? You know.
But I
Yeah.
think that's what makes the novels good, isn't it? Because you spend so long with the characters, really exploring them, so they are really genuine, that you really care about what happens to the characters.
Yeah, which is, as an author, that's what you're aiming for. You want the reader to be invested in those characters, care about what happens to them.
And it 100% works in your books because I've always been really invested in them.
Oh, brilliant.
Like, I started reading Gil, I think yesterday, and I'm like halfway through already, and I'm just like, I need to know what's going to happen next.
I think quite a challenge for writers of sort of gangland and gritty crime as well is having a character that does bad things, but the reader still empathises with them because they can see what pushed them into doing those bad things.
Yeah, and I think that's what for me tipped my first read of yours into the 5 stars, because you really did sort of genuinely empathize for every character in the story, and like you could genuinely understand their motivations and why they did the things that they did, and they felt really real.
Yeah,
Like those motivations, you know, you could really imagine someone actually doing those things.
yeah.
And I think that, like, bringing that to life in fiction is really hard to do.
Yeah, yeah. I think how can I put it? I've seen a lot, if you know what I mean. I've seen a lot of the bad side of life, and a lot of it as a child, and it does stay in your mind, and so those things do become quite vivid.
Yeah, I've worked with
Obviously,
people.
not going into details, but yeah, those things that were bad when I was a child, it kind of helped me with my career now. So yeah,
I've worked with people who've ended up in sort of prison and things, and it's for some quite bad things, and you sort of do realise that often there's a reason
yeah,
why their lives have taken them that way. And I think it's interesting when you can see that reflected in a book so well.
yeah,
Really is a good thing to see, because I
yeah.
think people need to understand like those things.
Yeah, it's funny because my first ever book, my first editor, I can't remember the first book she read, but she said to me straight away, "I know that you've lived through things." She could tell straight away, and she found that really appealing.
We've got 3 minutes left.
Right.
So give everyone a reminder about your books.
About the latest or about the
Yeah,
books?
give everyone show off the latest one. Give us a reminder
Okay.
about it.
Well, that's the latest one, Guilt, which is about Laura and her daughter Candice. And Laura is now a successful businesswoman with a chain of fashion boutiques. But a few years prior, she was a working girl who went by the name of Crystal. And she did some pretty bad things when she was a working girl, some of which she was forced into for various reasons. And now, unfortunately, the past has come back to bite her because somebody knows what she did back then and they're out to destroy her. So that's Guilt.
And then all that's left to say is thanks for joining us.
Oh, thanks very much for having me. I've enjoyed it.
And don't forget to share the link to
Crime Central.
Manchester Crime Central so that everyone who's in, because we have a lot of members in Manchester.
Right, brilliant. Will do.
So you should definitely share it so that people can come along.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, I'll do that. Thanks very much, Caroline.
No problem.
Thank
Thanks
you.
for joining us.
Thank you. Bye.